Welcome to Helen Bulkeley Talks With, and I am thrilled to bring you my conversation with Mandy Hickson, one of the first female fighter pilots in the RAF. She flew 45 missions over Iraq during the completion of her 3 tours of duty. She was only the second woman to fly the Tornado GR4 on the front line, and she's now put pen to paper and has shared all her incredible experiences with us in her book, An Officer Not a Gentleman. She is now an inspirational guest speaker, and as you listen to her pioneering story, I think you'll see why. I loved your book, so congratulations on writing it and getting it out. And there's so much I can discuss with you from it, but what I tend to like to do is sort of go back to the start, so people that haven't read it or don't know you, how you got into, from your passion, your desire to become a fighter pilot, and how you did it on the way.
Well, it's a good one, isn't it? Because I think a lot of people go, fighter pilot, out of this world, I could never do that. And it's absolutely not the case. And one thing I loved was that I was surrounded by people from all walks of life, and it wasn't just the elite of society or anything like that. It's just people that had a passion, were willing to work really hard towards that goal and then achieve it. And I really saw that. And it was a complete mishmash of different people. Loved that. And I got into it literally, grew up in Manchester. Mum was a teacher, dad ran his own carpet fitting business, and I joined the Air Training Corps because I wanted to meet some boys. That was purely the only reason I did it, because I went to an all-girls school and my mum said, well, why not? You may as well. And I thought, oh, that's a good idea. So I joined and I flew, and suddenly I thought, oh, right, this is what I want to do. But women weren't allowed to be pilots in the Air Force. So I was sort of set on, I thought, well, I'll be a police officer. I'd looked at the graduate scheme and I could see I could do all this. So I'd sort of set my heart on that's what I would do. Because the door was shut to women to being pilots. But I still continued to pursue the dream, in as much as at 17, I got a flying scholarship. I used all my paper round money to buy the extra 10 hours to get my private pilot's license, went off to uni, joined a club there basically to keep my hours going. And then it was in my second year at university, whilst flying with a club at university with called the University Air Squadron, that they changed the rules and they allowed women to fly. And I was like, timing, yay! So it was just impeccable. And so that was my door to get into the Air Force.
And through that door you went.
Yeah, I leapt. I was like Usain Bolt off the starting block, it was as soon as they opened it. So I applied, and then I failed all the tests to be a pilot, which I was gutted about. So I had 160 hours of flying, and I'd won aerobatics competitions and things like that. And yet I couldn't pass these computer tests. I thought, this is it. I was mortified, but you're allowed to do them twice. So I waited a year. I resat them again, and I failed them again. And that was it, really. And then basically on this club I was in, the University Air Squadron, the boss of that squadron was a lovely chap. And he just said, this doesn't seem right to me. They've only just opened the doors to women. Why are so many women failing the tests? And he said, you know what, maybe the tests are flawed. And I thought, and this is where, so it was the first time I'd really experienced that feeling of not just believing in yourself, but you had to have other people believing in you. And there's only so far you can get by going, I've got a strong mental attitude, I can achieve whatever I want. Actually, you do need mentors and supporters to also believe in you. And that was really the first time it sort of came to fruition. And, he took it all the way to the top of the Air Force as well with me. And in the end, when the Air Force offered me a commission to become an air traffic controller, and I said to him, I don't really want to take it. He said, you're in, get a foot in the door. And I was like, okay. So I literally, it was like jumping off the edge of a cliff and thinking, I'm signing up for a 12-year commission, which was what I was signing up for at the time, thinking in air traffic control, which I didn't want to do. But I just kept thinking, sometimes you've got to get a foot in the door. And then once you're in, you can make your case. And I joined, and I just wrote hundreds of letters. He was still on my case. And eventually I just got this letter back, and it sort of said, Dear Flying Officer Wells, the RAF would like to give you a branch change to pilot. I was like, yes. And then I found out later I was taken on as a test case, because they couldn't understand why all these women were failing. And they thought if they took me on, it'd be nice to see how far I'd get before I failed. And that's literally what they said at one point. I was like, what?
when I read that in the book, I couldn't believe it. It's like, wow, you know, for everything you've been through and everything you're doing to keep going, and then they're like, you know, oh yeah, we presumed you'd fail, so we just thought, let's see how far you go. That's awful.
Oh, I know. And it was because a friend of mine was doing a dissertation about testing. And so she went to Cranwell to officer aircrew selection. And they said, we've got all these cases. Here's a really interesting test case. And it was me. And I was her mate. And she was like, I know about this one. And she was like, oh, that's really interesting. And why did you take it? They said, well, we're sort of getting to see how far she'll get. She's doing all right at the moment. And I was like, so she sort of shared that with me. It was really funny, really made me laugh.
Oh, God, talk about having good friends in the right places, but also so good that you did have a sponsor from early on. I love what you're saying there about, you know, self-belief and then having someone with you. But also, I mean, I know this is the first time we've spoken, but you're just like you've come across in the book. It's brilliant. You know, you sort of say that you're very buoyant and you're confident, you like to be loud, you know, there's no holding back, and it's brilliant. But how did you find going through? Because there were times you had to learn when to be that and also when to rein it back in and be who you thought they wanted.
Yeah, but I think that's it. That's the same as life, isn't it? You know, sometimes you realize you have to fit in and you just morph into this, you know, group environment. And there were times in the Air Force when I realized I was doing that, swearing too much, drinking too much beer, perhaps trying to be more blokey than perhaps I am. I am a bit of a tomboy, and I always have been. And, you know, but I'm also, I mean, on the Myers-Briggs, I'm as E as it comes, you know, on an extrovert scale. You know, how do I recharge? With people, you know, I just want to be with people all the time. And even my husband's going, really, do we have to go out again? I'm like, yes. He goes, but you're exhausted. I was like, I know, but it'll be good. It'll be good for us. So I am like that. But you're right, there were times when the Air Force sort of said to me, you know, you need to rein it in. You can't be boisterous. You can't be who you are. And I was thinking, well, surely that's why I wanted to join the Air Force, so I could actually be who I was. You know, I was never a high heel, stiletto, lots of makeup person. And I didn't want to be. And I felt that the Air Force could give me the opportunity to be how I was. And then to be going through officer training and being told, actually be more feminine. And I'm thinking, you're training me ultimately to fly a fast jet and drop weapons on people. And yet you want me to be more feminine. You know, and I was like, I'm wearing a skirt. What more do you want? You know, it's like they go, no, we need more than that. I think you're pricking up on the bit where they said to me, you know, you're not allowed to drink pints. And so I made a real point of ordering 2 halves on every time I bought a round. And they hated that because it was really ramming it into their faces, you know. But
oh well, but that's great though, because you were still sticking to the rules. You were just being like, hey, I know what I'm doing here. Yeah, but what I really got the sense of as well was that you knew yourself well enough throughout to stick with things, even though, you know, or not that you cast a blind eye to it, but sometimes things were happening. You were like, I don't want this to become a problem because I'm a woman. I don't want that to happen. But even things from a young age, you know, it made my blood boil when I know that when you were a teenager, you were told to lose weight. When you were super sporty and you're tall, and then that came out a few times throughout the book. So, you know, these things can have a huge effect on people.
Yeah, and in fact, that was a really interesting point because when I was editing the book at the end, a really good friend of mine who works in sort of TV, she said, oh, I'm happy to have a read of it. And she says, you keep on going on about your weight throughout. And I was like, yeah. And she said, do you think that still has an impact on you? I said, absolutely. Because, so just to explain to everyone else that doesn't know, basically, when I first tried to join the Air Force just for a scholarship, they told me I had an obesity problem, and I was 6 foot tall and I was 12.5 stone. I mean, to put it in perspective, I dream of being 12.5 stone now, you know. I mean, that's what I would like to be now if I could lose a couple of stone or something. So this is going, hold on a minute, 6 foot tall. That is BMI wise, absolutely really healthy. And they said I had to be 9 3/4 stone because I didn't fit onto any height charts because they didn't have height charts for women above, 5'8". And so he literally added a couple of pounds and went, be that. And can you imagine at 17, so I'm playing county sport. I'm doing sport every hour that God sends. And, you know, at school and doing all my activities. And I think, and I literally stuck to chicken and broccoli. I remember it for 4 months, chicken and broccoli every single meal. And I went to the gym before school, you know, sport at school and gym after school, because I had this in my head. I thought, must burn more calories than I ingest, you know, and it took me literally 4 months to do it. And I think how appalling was that? But we didn't challenge it as well. And I just think, when I look back now, I think, thank goodness we are more vocal. Thank goodness we do challenge things. So if my son was told that now, I'd say, actually, no, let's Google it. Let's have a look at that. Let's create a case against it. Whereas I think in those days, when someone from authority told us something, we just believed it. And we just went, okay, that's what I'm going to have to do. But of course, that would have an effect on you for the rest of your life, and I still hear myself saying it all the time, going, oh my gosh, I'm really fat at the moment. My friends are going, Mandy, you're looking great. I'm going, but that's what is a psychological, thing that has happened, that always, whenever you look in the mirror, you therefore think, I'm overweight.
Mm-hmm. I know, and it was, as I was going through, that's really interesting that someone else picked up on it, because I was like, but I've seen pictures of you and I know what you look like, and it's true. And nowadays everyone does fixate on the number on the scales, and it doesn't reflect how active someone is or how well they eat. So I really felt for you through that. That must have been really difficult, and it was just another layer to battle throughout everything, as they let women through the doors. Start picking up on your skirt length, and you can't drink pints, and you need to lose weight, and it's like, give the woman a chance.
Exactly. But it's really funny, isn't it? Because I didn't want the book to be a sexist rant in any way.
No, it doesn't come across like that.
It's really, and when I do my motivational speaking, I often get asked to speak at diversity and inclusion events and women's events, and I say, look, I'm really happy, and I say right at the start, okay, I was the second woman to fly Tornado GR4 on the front line. There's only ever been 5 of us. And that's it. I then park it. And the rest of it is just about being a pilot. And I think that's really, really important, that, you are there then, for example, for yourself, you would be there as a journalist, not a female journalist, because actually, why do we have to make the distinction? I've done a job. I was really good at it. I served my country, and I'd like to talk about that, not about being a woman in that man's world. And I'm happy to always answer questions on it. But when I was writing the book, I was really aware. I just thought, I don't want it to be, I had a great time in the Air Force. Yes, there was these levels of sexism that were happening, but that was 20 odd years ago. And when I speak now, especially to youngsters, the Air Force has changed, as has society. And it's had to mirror what has happened in society. And it wanted to. And it's a very different environment nowadays in the military than it was then. Just because, we as a society have evolved as well, thank goodness.
But the point is, whatever you look like, whatever you are, you were really, really good at what you did, and that's the message you like to get across. So I want to talk about what it's like to fly one of these planes, because I've never met someone like you, and that's why it was so good reading the book, because you sort of let me into your world. I mean, it's never been on my radar, as it were, but I know that when a fast jet goes overhead, there's like a boom inside me, and you just have that instant feeling of, that is so cool, like it just rattles you to your core. And I always have that feeling of like, I want to be up there, I want to do that, and then it goes away, and I sort of think, that must be really scary. But is it like that every time you fly, that sort of, this is so amazing?
It is an amazing job. I mean, I'm truly honoured to have done it. Honestly, I feel blessed that I've had that opportunity in life to do that. And it's exciting, but it's like with anything, isn't it? Can you imagine if you went, for example, from leaving school to being told that you've got to be a presenter on some show or something? You think, I can't do it, because you need stepping stones, and that's what the military do. You build up by flying faster and faster and faster jets, and then you get to fly the Tornado. That beast there. Now that is a beast. I love it. I mean, you stick the rockets forward and you are literally rammed back in your seat. You can feel the G-force, like the start of a roller coaster ride. And I always describe it, if anyone's ever been on Stealth at Thorpe Park, which literally just goes up, does a wing over and comes back. It's a 10-second roller coaster ride. It's the best one in the world. That's what it feels like flying a fast jet. That's as close as a normal person would get to that experience. And it is exhilarating beyond measure. But you're also very focused, and you get very used to it. So, I mean, at one point in my book, I talk about actually being complacent whilst being in a war zone, whilst people are shooting at you, you're still quite complacent, because actually everything becomes normalized. And it's like anything, isn't it? When you do something for the first time, it's like, oh my gosh. But actually, after a while, it's just your office. But you can never get away from, my favorite, of course, is always, in fact, flying in, say, Scotland or Wales, or the Lake District, you're coming around corners, you've got the glacial sides on either side of you, and the walkers are up there, and you're just going, Oh yeah, you so are gonna get this. And then you scream past and you turn the jet on the side, you get that, and they're like, you can imagine them saying, they waved at us, they saw us. And you go, we can see you from ages away, but they don't hear you until the noise has passed. So as you go past, you can literally keep on going, you know, and you're thinking, I'm sorry, but it's still really good fun.
Yeah, whoops, but that was really cool.
Oh, give me much.
Well, I'm glad to know that it feels just as cool up there.
It does.
But of course, when you did sign up to the RAF, as much as you got in, you said you won competitions doing acrobatics and you love flying, you had 160 hours for, you were obviously signed up to flying, but you sign up to something a bit more when you joined the RAF. And I know that you talked about in your book about that at the flick of a switch was destruction and misery, and you were in control of that. So as much as you knew that's what you signed up for, how is it when it becomes a reality?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question, actually, because someone says to me, when you join the Air Force, you obviously join knowing that's what you're going to do. But the irony is, in some ways, you don't really, because you sign up for it knowing that that is the end point. But each time you do a course, you're wanting to be the best that you can be. You're wanting to graduate at the top of the course. You're wanting to fly the next jet up or the next fastest aircraft. And so you always want to be, and it just so happens that the ultimate goal, the prize, the fast jet flying, comes with it the fact that actually you're not going to be doing something like helicopter flying with search and rescue, where you're operational, but you're doing it, in a really wonderful role of helping people to survive. Your ultimate goal is that you will be going to war and defending the nation and representing the country in different theatres of conflict all over the world. And that is it's a moment when you go, great, I finally got there. But it's a really weird feeling is when you get out to that theatre of war for the first time, that area of conflict, and you do see a video of someone shooting at you, or, you're tasked to go on a bombing mission, and it's a moment of realization where you go, yeah, people might die now at my hands. Now that is a big moment. And it's not one that's taken lightly. And, you need to get your head around that as well. But in some ways, when we were in Iraq and they were shooting at us, they're also trying to kill you. So there is this feeling of, actually, it's not just a poor person, a civilian on the ground, actually you are in a war zone. And so it's an odd one. It's one that children always ask me, what's it like to kill someone? You go, can we not, it's not really just that, can we just sort of go a bit deeper than that? So it is a slightly funny one, really. But no, you're right, it does take your head, you need to get your head around that before you go out to that theatre of war.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. But as you said, that's what the RAF is designed to do. It's not like you suddenly went from flying at 17 to you're about to do this in the war. They took you through it. And even like all that, that's what I said to you, I'm not very good at maths. The number crunching and the fact that whilst you're flying at these incredible speeds, they then chuck other things at you that you have to work out. Yeah. That's incredible.
I know. And the best one was always the analogy of water skiing behind the jet. You suddenly realize you feel like there's the jet and you're like hanging on for dear life at the end of that water skiing tow line. You're thinking, I'm not quite on top of this. And that's where you can really help yourself. Prior preparation is everything. And it's one of the things that, when I speak to businesses, and they say, oh, what are the analogies? What can you help us with? And you say, just things like preparation, before you go into a meeting, have you got every single fact and figure that you need? And you must have that as well, Helen, in your world. If you're interviewing someone or you're about to go into a job, you want to make sure that you're in the best place possible, that you're not just going to be caught on the hoof and thinking, oh, do I know that? Because that's a horrible feeling. And you can do so much of that beforehand. And that really does help you. It really does. So, you can do a lot.
No, I totally agree. And that's what's really cool about when you be able to transition all this information that you've got in a world that not many people get to go into, but it highlights what we do normally. And, I always say that if ever I'm presenting anything, I have to memorize and have a really strong first minute and then the rest flows. So I suppose that's, it's the preparation. It's the preparation.
That first minute's everything, isn't it? Oh, and once you start, you then go, oh gosh, I'm all right now. I'm in my zone now. Yeah.
Chuck anything at me now. Yeah, exactly. And of course that leads on because you did have a massive career transition. And I was thinking when I was writing these questions down, I was sort of thinking, well, I want to know what it was like about when you finished that career. And I was like, well, it seems from what I can see, you're equally as happy in a very, very different career.
Yeah.
And it's probably quite a nice thing to talk about now, because obviously in COVID, it's very hard for everyone. A lot of jobs are on the line and people are having to rethink. And it might not be where you thought you'd be going, but it can still be a very positive step.
Yeah, it can actually. So when I left the Air Force, I retrained to be an airline pilot, because that's what everyone did. And it's almost like you're on a gravy train, a bit like, you finish school, do you go to university? It almost takes a little bit more courage to step out of that and say, actually, I'm going to look at using my skill set. But I think when you're in the military, again, you don't realize just how broad your skill set is, everything from project management, organizational skills, leadership development, teamwork, all of those things, you're really good at them and you have been trained brilliantly, but you have no idea that you have. And you come out and you join the local PTA and you're thinking, why is everyone so disorganized? And I can't help myself. I am going, yeah, I'll lead it. I just can't help that sort of like people faffing around. And, I end up being the chairman of the tennis club because I can't stand disorganized meetings, So all of these things you just do because you're just used to doing it. And it was then that's when I thought, actually, I don't have to just do what everyone's doing. And also I had 2 little boys. The thought of myself and my husband both being airline pilots at that point would have been horrific on the whole balancing. And so actually, yes, to look at a different career. And it's been fascinating in COVID. I mean, much like yourself, the events industry, boom, just disappeared. And I lost my sense of purpose as well. So it's lovely talking to you about that, because how do you get that grounding? And it was all about that adaptability, wasn't it? And saying, okay, you might not have been being paid for what you were doing. So, how can you adapt to feel that you have a sense of purpose? And bizarrely, my husband and I volunteered at the hospital, and we have ended up hilariously live with boys, 3 men in my house. All I do is laundry. I volunteered at the hospital. And where did they need me? The laundry. Yay! So I ended up basically folding scrubs. That was it. Every shift, I was just literally washing, tumble drying and folding. And my husband and I did that for many months because I needed purpose, and again, it doesn't matter what you're doing. You need direction. You need to have a reason to be, don't you? And that's where you've got to think outside the box. And we are seeing that a lot of people and businesses are struggling, but it's like going, how can I adapt? What can I do? And they've got this lovely mantra, say, control the controllables. I love it. I quote it all the time to myself is, if I'm feeling a bit low, I say, right, what can I do about this situation now? And how can I change it?
Yeah. Well, good for you. That's amazing. I love that you went from laundry at home to laundry at hospital, but good for you, because you didn't have to do that. I mean, you really didn't have to do that. And that would have made such a big difference. And I'm sure it would have been great for some people knowing they had a fighter pilot in the laundry.
Yeah, exactly. And in fact, it was really funny because I just launched the book at that point. And the woman that was sort of like in charge of the volunteers, she sort of said, someone was talking about it and I hear you've got a book out. So I ended up taking a book in and signing it for her. And she was like, can we have this in our local, like the Volunteers magazine, When I was like, of course you can. So it was quite funny.
That's brilliant. And I'm sure you get asked a lot of questions on it, but when you look back at your time in the RAF, is there anything, whether it was life-changing or life-affirming, is there anything that really stands out? I know you talked about quite a few experiences. Some of them, I know your first tour in Iraq was very difficult mentally, and then it got better when you went back. But when you look back over those, is it 16 years? You were 12 years?
So the end of being nearly 17, actually, yeah.
Oh, right. So when you look back, is there something you think of?
I think one of the most memorable flights I ever had was when we were airborne over the Atlantic on September the 11th. And that was just, it sits there. And I can almost remember exact radio calls. I can remember exact feelings. It's as if the whole trip was in Technicolor to me. To be in cloud in the middle of the Atlantic doing air-to-air refueling and staring intently at this aircraft next to you, and you can just see the strobe and you're there staring at it. I've got tears. If you've ever done computer games, and you got immersed in something, you suddenly realize you've got tears pouring down your face because you haven't blinked. I'm like that. I'm staring at this aircraft. And then we heard that America had shut their airspace, and we had this moment of sheer horror where we thought, I don't get it. I don't understand it. And it's that whole, how do you process something? How do you control the controllables when you have no idea of the bigger picture? And, you know, it was for us, it was realizing that, gosh, aircraft could be being turned back. They could be diverted. We're in thick cloud. Is there going to be confusion here in the Atlantic? Might we end up hitting another aeroplane? You know, so scanning the airspace in front of us to clear that passageway through the air, and then coming over the UK and hearing this horrific situation of this American aircraft carrier, you know, off the south coast. It was just near the Isle of Wight, and they have a 5-mile exclusion zone, and this little propeller airplane was flying directly in towards the zone because they were lost, basically. And the Americans believed it was a terrorist. They could see this track, it was flying directly towards them. And we're on the radio and we're hearing, we are loading live weapons, we're about to shoot you down. And we were thinking, what? This is crazy. And it's now a beautiful September's day. And we're then thinking, this is, and we thought, is this a joke? You know, is this some sort of sick parody we've walked into? And actually we realized very quickly it wasn't. And air traffic control in the end gave us radar vectors, and we started to dive down to try to intercept this aircraft. And right at the last minute we managed to reach them on the radio. They moved their course, and he was sort of like, I'm really sorry, I'm lost. And we were like, well, you're really sorry, but you're about to be shot down, you know. And we told the Americans, and they said, okay, we abort the firing, you know. But we still didn't know what had happened in America. So we land, and I just remember we landed these jets, and air traffic control were a bit cagey with us when we landed, and we walked in, and as we walked into the engineer's crew room, there's this tiny, crappy little TV on in the corner, and we just watched the Twin Towers come down, and we were like, and we just felt like we'd been part of that whole thing, hearing everything building up, but again, not understanding it. And that day was a day that, you know, I know it sits with everybody for different reasons, and we all know what we were doing at that moment. But I just think because we were airborne, it just felt like we were part of it, that it sort of really made a monumental impact to my life, really.
I'm sure it did. What an incredible situation, and amazing that you were able to help this aircraft out who was innocently lost. I mean, that's amazing. But yeah, I remember it very well, and I know, you know, when we see it on the television, and it was like you were watching a movie. So yeah, that must have had a huge effect that you were sort of, you know, in the air and part of it. But you know, just hearing you talk, then you really are such a good storyteller. So it was, I know when you said you were looking to become an airline pilot, and then that wouldn't have worked because your family, and you know, you're very good at inspiring people now. So it must be so cool to draw on everything. And I know, you know, retell all your years of experience and put it to good use in all different walks of life.
Yeah, I feel really blessed, actually. In fact, I've always enjoyed telling stories. I mean, my mum always quotes back, and in fact, I was speaking to the other day, and she was really roaring with laughter. She said, do you remember your English GCSE? And I said, well, sort of. She went, you wrote a story, and then you came home and you were telling us what you'd written for your English GCSE, and you ended up being so moved by your own story, you ended up crying whilst we were having dinner. And when she told me, I was like, quite embarrassed. And I said, she went, oh my gosh, Sarah, my older sister, and I were roaring with laughter, and you were so moved by this emotional story that you're now crying with it. So yeah, I've always enjoyed telling stories. But you know what, it makes you realize as well, and you're in that sort of business of storytelling, it is the most powerful medium. So when I left, I mean, I was literally telling a story at a dinner party. We were all a bit drunk, and I was telling the story about where I'd been shot at by a surface-to-air missile in Iraq. And this woman at the table went, oh my gosh, we've got an event coming up. Will you speak at it? And I sort of went, yeah. And she said, we'll pay you. And I thought, oh my God, people will pay me for talking about myself. Oh yeah. And so I was like, yeah, sure. So I couldn't believe that this was a career that anyone could have. And it was just so funny. And basically I stood at this event, and I had it on cards, you know, I had this story, and then I got shot at by a surf. And she was like, ditch the cards, Mandy, it's your own story. And I never touched cards again since, and I've never ever read from a script since. But you realize that as leaders in business as well, people anchor their memory is anchored upon stories. So you can put out a whole load of facts and figures, no one will ever remember them. But if you as a leader want to inspire your organization and you just tell one story which shows vulnerability, it shows growth in the company, it shows whatever, people remember the story. And it's how we've grown over the generations, isn't it? And actually the power of the story is phenomenal. And so if we can do that and embrace that and harness it, then that's how we can become good speakers and great motivators for other people as well.
Yeah, it's so true. And I was just thinking then, you know, you tell so many amazing stories in it, and I was gripped by all of them, all slightly removed from anything I've ever had experience in, but I could still sort of think this is so cool. But the one I was lying in bed next to my husband, and I'd read all these incredible things about you'd done, and I put it down. I was like, you won't guess what Mandy did now. And I said, she gave her son calamine lotion instead of Calpol.
Oh my God, it was hysterical. Oh, someone said, you've got to put that in the book. And I was like, shall I, shan't I? I couldn't decide whether to. It was the most hysterical thing. I mean, it was the lowest ebb in our lives, you know. My husband was in Australia. My brother-in-law had just died actually in Pakistan, so it was horrendous. My two sons both had chickenpox. One is this huge fever next to me, and I just feel him going, oh, mummy, and I was like, okay, sweetheart, mummy's on top of it, you know. And you've got children, you know how it's like. And I've got 2 bottles on my bedside table. I thought, I won't wake him. And so I got that syringe that we have on the top of the cabinet, and I just dunked it into the bottle, sucked it up, and lean over and ingest it. And as he did it, I almost like, it was like an alien of like this whole, but I thought, and he went, that's horrible. And I went, I know it is, but you need to have a second dose. So, you know, I'll do it again. And at this point, he just sat up and went, was violently sick. And I thought, that's not right. At which point I turned the light on, and yeah, I've given him calamine lotion. And I rang up the local hospital, and they said, bring him in immediately. I went, well, he has been sick everywhere and it seems to be out of his system, so do I have to? And they went, it's poison. I went, yeah, I know, but I've got a 1-year-old who's asleep in bed and I really don't want to wake him as well. And he was like, it's poison. I was like, anything else I can do? Give him some milk. I was like, okay, I'm fine, I'll do the milk. Terrible.
I know, not at all. It was just when you picture the scene of like the lights weren't on, I'll just give them some medicine, I'll get this sorted in a jiffy. And it was like, I did tell my husband about all the amazing stuff you did, but that one I was like, that I can link up to that parenting one.
Yeah. Oh yeah. In fact, there's some other bits as well. So I've recently recorded the audio book, and I was recording in this studio with this lovely guy, and he's on his headphones and I'm reading my own book. And I'm getting to this story, and I don't know if you remember, but you might have read it, where I'm dancing in a nightclub in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
At which point I tell the punchline of the story. He bursts and roars out laughing. He went, I'm so sorry. I've had this like laughter bubbling inside me for some time. And I was like, I'm going to have to bloody record that again, aren't I? It's like, yeah, I'm sorry you are. Because it was just such a funny thing. And it really made me laugh. And I was laughing as well when I was doing it. And people said to me, oh my God, is your laugh in the book? You know, and I was like, I didn't think it was very professional though to have me go, you know, which is what my laugh is. So I actually don't laugh in the book. I am professional.
Then you can have like an additional extra, like here's just 2 minutes of me laughing. You're welcome.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. But you know, you talk about Las Vegas then, you've done so much traveling. How was it like, you know, they talk about the travel bug. Did you sort of think, because I've done a lot of traveling in work, and when I had kids I was like, well, I've done a lot of traveling, maybe I can put that to bed, but you can't ever really put things that you love to bed, can you? So how did you?
Oh, that's what I've missed. Have you missed that?
Massively. Being around people and travel and opportunities, you know.
I know, and it made me realize, you know, I really do enjoy speaking, and of course while we've been in lockdown I've been doing loads of Zoom speeches and lots of stuff on the internet. It's not the same.
You must have been slightly addicted to that buzz of flying. So what fills that void? I know you said you've always been sporty and you know, like competition, so what can fill that void when you've been in that area for such a massive part of your life and then going somewhere else?
I think you fill it in different ways, don't you? And I think you do and I've always believed this, you do what's right for you at the right stage of life. And I think when I left the Air Force, I did feel that I was missing it. And then I ended up, well, I firstly carried on flying as a volunteer. So flying youngsters from the Air Cadets. And I did that for 7 years. I only stopped doing that last year. And then basically I got into speaking, and that then took me all over the world still speaking at big events, and I mean, I love it. It's so exciting. So going into Miami to do a speech, or Budapest or somewhere, and I love meeting new people. I love that buzz. I love performing as well. So it ticks a lot of boxes for me. And that's how I get the excitement. Plus, I love skiing, and as long as we can get at least 2 ski trips in a year, as fast as I can possibly go down a hill. And it was really annoying on one of the last trips we were on. I was there, I was in the tuck. I'm sort of trying to get 100 kilometers an hour. My blooming son went past me, and I thought, that's it. I'm never taking them again. Better than me.
Holiday over.
It's over. I'm never paying for you to come, because you're now better than me by quite a long way.
And so with your book, I don't know, at the beginning when we were sort of chatting away, how can people get it, if you want to show it to us, and how they can follow you on social media?
This one. Yeah, so basically it's an officer, not a gentleman, and it's basically all about my journey to fly fast jets. It's funny, it's easy read, it's it's a very simple read, it's nothing too cerebral in there. It's on Amazon, so if you just Google it as well. And the audiobook's been recorded, and I've just picked up a publishing contract for that, so that probably won't be out till next February. But yeah, it's basically available in paperback and as an ebook.
Amazing. And I certainly love reading it. And actually, I saw an interview you did. Please tell us what that line was from the publishing company about when they read your book, because for me it's so untrue about who you're speaking to. So do let us know. Another battle we had.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it, really. And it was a real shame, because it wasn't, so a woman had heard me and she was really interested, and she was on the acquisitions team, and she put it to her team as a pitch, and the response was, yeah, plain books, not even aircraft, plain books are for a male readership that have no interest in a woman's story. And you know what? That could not actually have been more untrue, because I reckon I've sold around about 3,000 books now in a couple of months, which for a self-published author is pretty good. I'm really pleased with that. And I would say, I don't know what the percentages are, but a lot of comments are coming back from men who are loving it. And I'm being really honest and saying, do you know what? This has just been eye-opening. I mean, one bloke wrote this wonderful comment on Amazon just saying, I've been married for 40 years and I've finally sort of realised that seeing it through your eyes has actually opened my eyes to some of the issues my own wife must have been through. And I thought, well, that's incredibly honest for me to say after 40 years of marriage. So that's nice. Yeah.
And it just goes to show it's not a plain book in both senses of the word.
No, exactly, So, and that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, the other thing, I mean, she was a bit embarrassed, because she said on the plus side, ceiling smashing, glass ceiling breaking, and an inspirational woman. And she said, I'm sorry to say that. And she said, the book looks fantastic. And I could recontact her and said, she said, the book looks fantastic, Mandy, and I'm sure it's doing brilliantly. I'm really pleased for you. And but it just does make you realize how the publishing company still said to me, who's your target audience? And I kept saying men and women, young, and they went, that doesn't work. We need a specific audience. And I said, it's not for a specific audience, because when I speak, I can speak to everyone from primary school who love it, because you get them pretending to be airplanes, to CEO level, to the Women's Institute, and you tailor your stories to be appropriate for whoever you're speaking to with the right takeaways. And that's what the book is, really. There's takeaways for every age, actually.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely brilliant. And I see the motto behind you, dream it, believe it, do it. And I know that's which way you go.
It's the Zoom move. And that's how I finished the book off as well, with a lovely story about a girl I flew with.
Yeah, well, it's brilliant, and I urge anyone to read it. And I'm so grateful for your time today. Thank you so much. I've loved talking to you just as much as I've loved reading the book and having all the stories, and you're incredibly inspiring. So thank you so much for
thanks, Helen. Honestly, it's been my absolute pleasure to join you. So thank you so much for having me on.